I'm Chris Himsel. I'm a retired Army colonel, having spent 30 years on active duty supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, a document that enshrines the rights of the individual over the state, or a dictator, or a king. I'm here today as a private citizen, honoring the mission and sacrifices made by U.S. service members and our allies on the bloody beaches of Normandy, France on D-Day, June 6, 1944, at the start of Operation Overlord, to defeat fascism and to make sure their sacrifices aren't in vain. As Sam mentioned earlier, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander on that day and future President of the United States, in his message to the troops stated, "You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade, toward which we've been striving these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of freedom-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you." At the four-star level, the strategic level, and the historical level, they were fighting for liberty. At the tactical level, at the platoon level, at the landing craft level, at the individual level, they were fighting for their brothers in arms, the guys on their left and right, in hopes that they would survive and one day make it home to their loved ones. 2,501 U.S. service members and 1,940 Allied soldiers died that day. Today, I'll talk about the legacy of that fateful day on both the strategic and tactical level. Unfortunately for you, I will not be as eloquent or succinct as General Eisenhower in his D-Day message. However, in my defense, Eisenhower had 6 months to prepare his message. I took about 6 hours to work my time. It's just that 6 months ago, I didn't know I needed to be delivering this speech. So what is liberty? What was it they were fighting for at the strategic level? Liberty is a state of being free from constraint or oppression, encompassing freedom of action, freedom of choice, freedom of expression. Freedom. 8 days from now, the U.S. Army will celebrate its 250th anniversary, shortly followed by the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Navy this fall. In those 250 years, every soldier that has ever put on the U.S. Army uniform has fought for freedom. Whether it was at Yorktown in 1781, the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, or Gettysburg in 1863, San Juan Hill in 1898, the Meuse-Argonne in World War I, during World War II, Korea, the Cold War, if you stood on the wall in Berlin, fought in the Fulda Gap, or were in Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the Balkans in the mid-90s, and the global war on terrorism post 9/11, at the strategic level, American service members have fought for freedom, not only for those in the United States, but for oppressed people all over the world. Our Army and our flag stood as a symbol of individual freedom for 250 years. So what was that crusade over 2 million U.S. service members would eventually participate during Operation Overlord? It was a crusade to end Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe. What did that tyranny look like? It's called fascism. Fascism is an authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement combining the state and church, characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and extreme nationalism. It often involves a cult of personality around a single leader, a disdain for democracy, and a focus on the greater good of the nation, often at the expense of individual rights and freedoms. It started with the cult of personality supporting a malignant narcissist demagogue named Adolf Hitler, a man hyped up on amphetamines, constantly lying to his people and bullying those around him. His twisted and self-centered view of the world resulted in tyrannical policies of fascist Nazi Germany. Those policies included a state where individual rights were subordinated to the greater good of the nation, as determined by the supreme leader, not by the will of the people. Mass deportation of non-Aryan people like the Jews and other undesirables such as homosexuals and others that spoke out against the regime. Creation of a mass surveillance state where the police, the Gestapo, had unchecked power and authority and total indemnity. Use of the state apparatus to punish political opponents. A state that banned and burned books that contradicted and challenged Hitler's view of the world. Sworn loyalty oaths to the party and their leader to get jobs. Co-opting religion to justify his policies. Today's fight for freedom continues, not on the beaches of Normandy, but in Ukraine and right here in America. The current president and his administration, aided and abetted by our congressional delegation, our governor and state attorney generals, are issuing orders, passing laws constraining our freedom of action, our freedom of choice, our freedom of expression, our freedom. With all due respect to Jeff Foxworthy, but you might be a Nazi if you do not condemn Nazism. If you let Nazis attend your political rallies. If you have dinner with pro-Nazi supporters. If you admire Hitler's generals. If you use terms used by Hitler. If you issue executive orders calling for mass deportations. If your executive orders giving police indemnity and establish massive surveillance states under the guise of government efficiency. If you use the state apparatus, the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the budget process to punish your critic and other undesirables. If you support banning and burning books and ignoring and trying to erase the contributions of America's minority populations under the pretext of moving from a DEI-based philosophy to one based on merit, where the only merit you have to be is to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Pete Hegseth. If you require personal loyalty oaths to the president and not the Constitution to get a job, you might be a Nazi. If you do not believe in the separation of church and state, if you do not follow the Constitution and ignore court orders and think you are above the law, you might be a Nazi. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald J. Trump and his minions at the Heritage Foundation through Project 2025 are systematically dismantling our liberal democracy. A system of government where we all have full adult suffrage, free and fair elections, broad protections of civil liberties, and replace it with a white Christian nationalist nation, not unlike Nazi Germany. Trump's big budget bill, beautiful budget bill, targeting Medicaid, reflects his assault on our minority populations. 50% of those on Medicaid are Black or Hispanic. It also targets our fellow veterans, a class of people that Trump thinks are losers and suckers. About 10% of all veterans between the ages of 19 and 64 are covered by Medicaid. And combined with the arbitrary cuts to the Veterans Administration, Trump is funding his billionaire tax cuts to himself and his buddies at the expense of our fellow veterans. Look, I've already talked too long. So if we want to honor the service members that stormed the beaches of Normandy 81 years ago, we must act now to secure that victory over fascism. The first battle is Trump's big, beautiful bill. It must not pass. You need to call Senators Graham and Scott and tell them that the big, beautiful bill does not reflect your values or the values of liberty and justice for all. Here we go, folks. Audience participation. Let's call them right now. Everybody, pull out your cell phones. We will call the Senate switchboard at 202-224-3121. Give your name, where you're from, and tell them not to vote for the billionaire tax cuts at the expense of veterans and the Veterans Administration. Okay, so everybody over here, when you call and dial in, ask for Senator Scott. All those over here, ask for Senator Graham. Here we go. Let me get this up. Here it comes. I got to type it in at the same time. 202. Can't see my phone. 224-3121. Asking for Senator Scott, asking for Senator Graham.
That number again is 202-224-3121.
Yes, this is Chris Insel, calling from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm a retired Army colonel, and I'd like to talk to you, Senator Graham, about Trump's big, beautiful bill. I'm sorry? Anybody get through?
Thank you for calling the Washington, D.C. office of Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Constituents wishing to share their thoughts with Senator Graham about current events as well as legislation for the use.
That number again is 202-224-3121.
I don't know if the senator knows this, but about 10% of all veterans between the ages of 19 and 64 are covered by Medicaid. And combined with arbitrary cuts to the Veterans Administration, Trump is funding his billionaire tax cuts to himself and his buddies at the expense of our fellow veterans. Also, over 1 million South Carolinians rely on Medicaid. Additionally, while it's difficult to pinpoint an exact number, reports that indicate that a significant portion of the active duty military families are eligible for and potentially use food stamps under the SNAP program. Estimates range from 100,000 to 275,000 military families being eligible. In 2019, 22,000 active duty service members were in households that received SNAP benefits. Some studies suggest that the substantial portion of the active duty population, nearly 26%, is food insecure, with a significant number relying on food stamps or food banks. Vote no to the big, beautiful bill. Do better for the people, the veterans, not your party leader or your donors, but the people and veterans. Thank you. We'll get town hall. We'll get a town hall. The second battle, to your point, we need to mobilize our forces now to ensure that Trump cannot continue his assault on democracy. We need to vote out all those that support Trump's agenda, and those that he endorses, and those that seek his endorsement. Unfortunately, that means every one of our Republican congressional delegate members need to be voted out. The third battle is election reform. If we continue to use our current election system of political party-centric dark money, gerrymandered districts, closed primaries, and plurality voting, we will continue to have a dysfunctional, irresponsible, and unaccountable government. Two final quotes from history. Benjamin Franklin is famously quoted upon passage of the U.S. Constitution in 1787 that, "You have a republic if you can keep it." Donald J. Trump has awakened the latent forces of authoritarianism and tribalism here in America, and is wreaking havoc on our Constitution for his own malignant, narcissistic ego. The last quote comes from Sun Tzu, an ancient Chinese general, philosopher, and strategist. His experience led him to believe, and I quote, "An evil man will burn down his own nation to the ground to rule over the ashes." The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people march with you.
Once again, that number is 202-224-3121. Call your senators.
Man, there's always a difference between a corporal and lieutenant colonel? Colonel, yeah. We know who get paid more, who has big words. I can show up. I got strong back, weak mind, but there's other people that know how to write a good speech. Oh, I really like the part where we called the senators. That was the exact kind of immediate kick I needed to just go get that done. So I appreciate that. Well, I don't know about y'all. Get a little warm. I did have a couple other people. You know, if you had family that served in the Great War or in World War II, and you would like to come and commemorate them, I certainly invite you up here to do so. One of the things that I remembered from the Memorial Day ceremony that I went to with the Vietnam veterans is a gentleman told everybody how important it was to provide their stories. And I feel like the greatest generation did a fairly good job of providing those stories and the things that they saw and the things that they did. And I kind of encourage those of y'all that maybe did serve, even if your stories you think are mundane, even if you think that maybe you're not proud of the things that occurred, it is still important to share that story, or somebody else is going to say those words for you. And they have a tendency to try to whitewash and, you know, somehow pretty up some of the hard things that happened in war. And your story is important because it builds that empathy, it builds that reality that keeps people from just sugarcoating how brutal war really is. So, sir, if you would like to come up here.
Good afternoon. My name's Kevin McKinney. I perform under the name Doc Snow, but I'm not here to talk about me. I'm not here to talk about my generation. I'm here to recognize people from the generation ahead of me. And I want to take you through quickly the ones that are personally connected to me. I want to recognize, first of all, my Uncle Joe. He was my mother's little brother who survived a forced landing in the North Sea during World War II. Lived to come home otherwise unscathed. I want to recognize his older brother, my Uncle Don, who survived an explosion aboard his aircraft above the Mediterranean, 3 years in a German prisoner of war camp, and a death march, basically, through Eastern Germany as they were staying one step ahead of the Red Army until he managed to evade from that death trap. I want to recognize my own father, who served in the American Army, took a bullet through the knee in France, and that experience left him with a lifelong love of peace. And I have to say, while I'm being candid here, that the PTSD, as we would now term it, that he lived with, also shaped my life. And I also want to recognize my connections by marriage. Uncle Francis on my wife's side, who did not survive the conflict by very long. His plane went down as he was returning from the war. And of course, I have to recognize my wife's father, Colonel Michael J. Quirk, who was a double ace, and who luckily did survive, or I wouldn't be here for various reasons. So all of those folks, all of their sisters, all of their brothers, their fathers, their mothers, their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents, every single one of those folks, I feel confident in saying, would be turning in their graves today. Could they see what is happening in Washington, D.C.? Could they see the erosion and degradation of humanity, the rule of law, and our rights? So, I want to say thank you all, few as we may be today, but I hope we will be many a week from tomorrow. Thank you for being here to say, as all those folks did, no! They said no to fascism! Thank you for doing the same!
Thank you. If there's anybody else that would like to share, we got a little bit more time for it. Speak now or forever hold your peace, maybe until next year when we do it again. I feel like this is a good one to have. We're right there on the brink of it just being too miserable. Hearing no objections.
We got one.
Oh, we do have one? Oh, we got one of my organizers.
Oh, you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Walker, for coming out today. Had many members of my family fight in the military. I unfortunately was born with feet as flat as this podium. They would not take me. But I want to recognize my Uncle Buck, John Wesley Johnson, my Uncle Charles Johnson, that survived Pearl Harbor. Uncle Buck was a gunner on the deck of the Nevada. And all the years since he came home from the war, the only thing that he told my dad about it was the blood was over his ankles on the deck. As he entered the later years of his life, usually on golfing outings with his brothers, he started to open up a little bit more. And my whole life, I knew him as the quietest, most mild-mannered Southern Baptist man you've ever met. Always a pleasure to be around. Always very quiet. And when you learn the things that he saw, you understand why. The kamikaze hit the gun next to his. He was that close to never coming home. My Uncle Charles, he was on base, he wasn't on a ship. But he fought just like everybody else, and he survived. And he brought back a bride from Hawaii. And they are very out of place in Alabama, let me tell you. But also want to recognize my grandfather, Jim Hosterman. He fought in the Pacific, earned 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star, fighting the Japanese, Papua New Guinea, in the Philippines. And at D-Day, my Uncle Frank, my Uncle Buck, who survived Pearl Harbor, were there for D-Day. Both sailors, they survived that as well. And they were part of, what, a fleet of 11,000 planes, 5,000 ships, over 160,000 infantry combined, the Allies. That took a toll on a lot of these people, on everybody that saw action there. And that toll passed down to generations after. My grandfather was not a pleasant man to be around. He saw some crazy shit in the jungles. He dealt with alcoholism. He later joined a cult. He did not deal with things well. I'd also like to recognize, from the other side of the pond, Private William Millen, also known as the Mad Piper of Normandy. The only man to don a kilt at D-Day. Due to its impracticality on the battlefield, it had been outlawed on the battlefield by British military regulations. However, his commanding officer, Lord Lovett, Simon Fraser, was kind of a badass, didn't really give a shit. And he told Bill, he said, "Laddie, put your kilt on, grab your pipes." Bill said, "That's against regulations." And he goes, "That's against English regulations, laddie. You and I are Scottish." So Bill stood in the surf, in his kilt, soaked in icy waters of the channel. And he played Highland Laddie at the request of his lord. Armed with nothing but his pipes and his skein-doo and his balls. But he survived that day. And he became an international figure in the piping world. But these men, they went into D-Day knowing full well that no one back home knew that they were going in. This was such a well-protected plan. Even the Nazis didn't know exactly what was going to happen. They knew it was coming. They didn't know when, they didn't know where. And these men, they went into battle and they faced some of the most hellacious conditions that human beings have ever seen. I'm sure we've all seen Saving Private Ryan, and I don't think that really illustrates the reality of it. Remember what they sacrificed for. Remember who they fought against and why they fought against them. Just make sure you remember them. Thank you all for coming out. We'll see you on the 14th.
I believe Highland Laddie is what we walked in on. It was always nice to march in on drums, right? Like I think that's just ingrained from my time at the Citadel. Every Friday was parade. So it might have been a small parade today, but you know, got to participate in a Friday parade. Speaking of Friday parades, I think we're at a good time. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for coming and braving this heat. We will be back June 14th. We will be assisting Carolina for all of that rally. There will also be Outfest going down on, what's that? What street is it on this year? They moved it. Don't know. It's right down, not on, golly. Anyway, so Outfest will be right down the road. We'll have a table at Outfest. My brain's burnt, I apologize. But that being said, once again, thank you all. And so let's go ahead and let's call this dismissal. Thank y'all for y'all's support. We'll see y'all again on the 14th.